after whatever, but
Okay.
anytime I hear it.
So, Articles of Confederation. This is our first government, okay? And so, who wrote it? Second Continental Congress wrote it. Okay? So, Second Continental Congress was in session May of 1775 to 1781. That is when they wrote the Articles of Confederation in 1781. Okay? The Revolution (1775), 1783. Okay? So we get the Articles. In 1781. Okay? Now, if you look at your learning intentions today, students will learn about the weaknesses and strengths of the Articles of Confederation. Now, normally you say strengths and weaknesses, right? But historians tend to focus on the weaknesses. So on the test, I can describe how the weaknesses of the Articles of Confederation led to its downfall. Hint, describe. With me? Okay. Now, I know you guys all remember this. We talked about confederal systems that all real powers held at the state and local level. Yes? And the national government has very little power. Correct? Okay. Now, so the founders were those at the Continental Congress, Second Continental Congress. Why did they give the national government so little power? They're worried about government overreach. It's another word for that. Tyranny. Yeah, they don't trust government. You understand that? You understand that? They don't trust it. So they're not going to give it much power. And what power they do give is going to be held at the local level in their states, or some would refer in their countries. Yes? Okay. So let's talk about the powers that they did have. What's this government look like? Guys, it's a one-branch government. Now, this is weird because we just wrote about the colonial governments, and even the colonial governments, they had 3 branches. This is going to be a one-branch government. It's a unicameral legislature. Each state is going to get to elect 1 representative. So how many people make up this legislature? 13. That's how often they're going to have elections. Annually. So if they don't like them, they can get them out. Annual elections. Now, in order to do anything in this body, you need a supermajority. You need 9 of 13, not 7, 9. Not a majority, a supermajority. Now, you Massachusetts. Pennsylvania, if you wish. New Hampshire. Rhode Island. DJ, Delaware. Didn't. Brady, it's gonna be Maryland. Aiden, you're gonna be North Carolina. South Carolina. Georgia. Who did I leave out? Oh, New York. Eloquent. You're New York. Let's go. All right. Oh, wait. Jacob. Jersey. Okay. Now, each one of you represent your state. Okay. Now, any guys familiar with the Chesapeake Bay? Know where that is? Comes up here in the Virginia. Okay. You ever heard of the Potomac River? Okay, it goes up to where like DC is now. Okay. DC. Yeah. All right, so where's my Virginia? Bend. Okay, where's Pennsylvania? Okay, now Pennsylvania, you don't really have very good seaports. So in order to import things, Pennsylvania, you're going to want to use the Chesapeake. Okay, but then over here, everybody pay attention. The rest you don't really have to say, except people that are in this room, in that room. Okay. Ben is going to charge an arm and a leg, Pennsylvania, to bring goods in through the Chesapeake Bay and up the Potomac. He's fleecing, another way of putting that, screwing his neighbor. Now, Nathan, who are you? Who are you with? Now, you're kind of landlocked a little bit. You got a little bit of it. But you're in a border dispute with Massachusetts. Where's Massachusetts? You guys are in a border dispute about whether you actually have any coastline or not. Actually, I think it belongs to Massachusetts. Now, South Carolina, where you at? South Carolina. Now, are you with Pennsylvania or are you with Virginia? You think he should be able to fleece his neighbor like that? Well, we're talking about Virginia here. Who are you with? You with Pennsylvania, you with Virginia? You're with Virginia. You're South Carolina. You're Georgia. Who are you with? With Virginia? Or are you with Pennsylvania? No, you're not. You understand Virginia is the gateway to the South. You understand? And Virginia is very powerful. Where's Virginia? That's Ben. Get in line. The Ben. Now, who are you? Oh. Are you with Pennsylvania? Are you with Virginia? We got some fights going on here. Now, there's an argument between Massachusetts and New Hampshire over their border. Who are you? Maryland. Who are you with? Are you with Massachusetts or New Hampshire? New Hampshire. Oh, you're with Massachusetts. How about you, Aiden?
That's right.
Live free or die or Massachusetts?
Definitely New Hampshire.
You're in New Hampshire? Okay, what is my point here? Border disputes, navigation rights. The seaport states, the ones with good ports, are fleecing their neighbors, literally. Okay? The country, guys, has gargantuan debt from the American Revolution. Right? It's a freaking mess. And these people are fighting with each other. Now, if you got 13 people in a room, you kind of got to put somebody in charge. Like, okay, who's in charge of these 13? So they're going to pick one of the 13 to be the first president of the United States, which of course is whom?
John Hanson. John Hanson.
The first president of the United States, technically, under the Articles of Confederation. The first leader of the legislature. Now, since the other 12 chose John Hanson, what kind of system is that?
That's a dictatorship. Representative.
What kind of system is that?
Right.
What'd you say? No.
Monarchy. Republic.
The legislature chose the leader. Parliamentary people, come on. So what powers do they give these 13 people? These 13 men. All right, let's list them. 1. Government can declare war. It can. Raise an army. It can. Coin money. You know who else can coin money? The states. And they can make treaties. Power of the 13. But you got to get 9. Do any of the above. Yes, sir.
That
one branch. One body, one branch. I like that song. One bread, one body. One body, one branch. Yeah. It's just a freaking stump. Yeah. You get it? It's like a stump. That's good on that. Got that? Okay. Treaties. All right. So let's look at the weaknesses. What are we looking at? The weaknesses of the Articles of Confederation. So it's just going to print money. What's going to back up this money? What's going to give it value? Is there a national bank at this point? There's nothing there, guys. And the states can print their own. So are the French going to take this new currency as payment for war debts? Right. This could be a problem. They're not wanting to take this money. As you realized, as we were talking about one branch, there's no executive. There's no executive branch. Now, what do we attribute to the executive branch? The sword, right? To enforce its decisions. There's no enforcement. That's a problem. Number 3, there's no no judicial branch. So this border problem we're having between New Hampshire and Massachusetts, these navigation rights, there's no one, they're fighting amongst 13. So you can see they're all tugging at each other. This isn't going well. Okay, now I'm just gonna. This is from Hamilton, Chernow's Hamilton. Okay, just let me read this paragraph to you. I know you don't like having me read like. Ready? Money problems pervaded all others under the Articles. America was virtually bankrupt. The federal government and state governments found it impossible to retire gargantuan debt inherited from the Revolution. European securities exchanges. Investors expressed skepticism about America's survival by trading our securities at a small fraction of their actual value. Guys, there were big businesses over here that were creating a lot of tobacco, a lot of cotton, and those businesses that were traded on the European markets, like others are traded on the New York Stock Exchange from other countries, international stocks, were trading at half of their actual value because they thought our country was going to fall apart. They were all over there in Europe going, these people think they can run a country by themselves. They all thought we were going to fail. And we were actually starting to prove them right with this weak government trying to hold the 13 states together. Follow. Okay. I could read more, but I'm not, because I know what that does to people. Okay. So here's the thing. You guys got your book? Page 40. Now, have I talked about Hamilton? The bastard child from the Virgin Islands? But did I talk about that? How he was sponsored by some wealthy people in his, no. Okay. All right. I'm going to talk about two guys. We'll introduce you. You know who these guys are already. I know. But maybe I can share something you don't know. First, let's start with Madison, James Madison. Okay. Now, when this new government took off in 1781, what happened to Jefferson? Where did he go? Went to France, right? And he was the ambassador to France. Okay. So he's not around. Where's John Adams? He's in England, the ambassador there. Okay. But before Jefferson took off for France, he met this young man, James Madison, who kind of became his protege, took him under his wing. Okay. By the age of 12, James Madison was consuming all of the classics, Socrates, Plato. Okay. He was doing advanced mathematics. He knew multiple languages at the age of 12, stuff that you would be doing in graduate school. Okay. The tutor he had was a doctor that lived in the home, the family home. So he was tutored every day. He's about 5'6". Okay. He's a sickly young man. He's your prototypical nerd. He's a bookworm. Okay. He's a nerd, but he's brilliant. You understand? And Jefferson noticed that. And so he took him under his wing and got him involved in politics in the Virginia legislature. Okay, so Madison's going to play a huge role here. But his relationship with Jefferson is very important. Back to this guy. He was born in the Virgin Islands. His mother was a native. His father is from Scotland. And he traveled to the Virgin Islands, met his mother. They had relations, and he went back to Scotland. I don't even know if he even knew he had a son. Now, as a bastard child in the 1700s, guys, that means something. Today, well, I mean, I don't know, 35% of the population born without a father in the household, something like that. So it's really common today. But back then, guys, it was kind of a stain on you if people knew you didn't have a father. Like, there's going to be stuff wrong with you. because you don't have a dad. Follow me? But by the age of 13, Hamilton had gone to work for this guy that ran a large shipping company out of the Virgin Islands. Ships, lots of ships. And the owner of this company wanted to travel to Europe. He would be gone about 6 months. So he left a 13-year-old in charge of his shipping company. When he got back, it was being run better than when he left. Now, what kind of stuff are they shipping to and from the Virgin Islands? Rum? What else? Maybe some rice. Sugar, molasses, like sugar plantation, sugar cane. Now, about 7 years ago, we went on a cruise. And we were on this island called Nevis. And they pointed to an island across the way that you could see. It was uninhabited. They told us that used to be a slave island. So when they bring slaves, oftentimes over from Africa, they bring them to the Virgin Islands first and then send them out to different places in North America. Okay. So no doubt this guy was doing all of those things: molasses, sugar, slaves, and so forth. Okay. So they thought really highly of this young man. And so a group of businessmen there in the Virgin Islands sponsored Hamilton to come to the States to study law. Okay. He shows up at Harvard. And they're like, okay, you're going to have to take these classes to go to law school. Now, you didn't used to have a bachelor's degree to go to law school. You could just go straight from high school to law school. Okay. Harry Truman, one of our few presidents, doesn't have a bachelor's degree. Just has a law degree. Okay. Now you got to get a bachelor's in something, history, political science, something, and then you go to law school. Okay. It's like pre-med, right? Study biology and then go to law, med school, right? Follow me? Okay. Now, Hamilton's like, well, I don't want to take all these classes. Just give me the books. So he gets all the books. They paid for it. He gets all the books. He reads all the law books. Comes back in 6 months and passes the bar. Genius. You understand? Like one of the smartest people on the planet in the 1770s. Genius. He's going to ace the ACT. Okay? No question. Probably could have done that in freaking 10th grade. All right? But anyhow, when the revolution breaks out, Hamilton joins the Continental Army. And he goes to the library, checks out some books on artillery, right? And he's like running the show. They're like, who is this guy? He like knows everything about artillery. So they bring him to Washington. And Washington makes him his aide-de-camp. Okay? When Washington is writing letters to the Second Continental Congress, letter after letter, we don't have enough guns, we don't have enough powder, we don't have enough boots. A lot of those letters were written by Hamilton. Okay? So that relationship is very important. Hamilton and Washington, Madison and Jefferson. You with me? Okay. We just kind of got to get that in there before I continue. So on page 40, guys, you've all heard of Shays' Rebellion. Okay. Now, there's some very interesting points to be made here with all of what I'm going to talk about for the remainder of class. You got 45? 35? Got it. We may not be able to finish the thought process, and you may not like me very much when I'm done, but I don't care. Actually, I do care. But, okay. So Daniel Shays was probably born in Hopkinton, Massachusetts, sometime around 1747. During the American Revolutions, he fought, look at these battles, Bunker Hill, Ticonderoga, and Saratoga. I'm at the top of page 40. He was promoted to captain in 1777. Shays resigned from the Continental Army after being criticized for selling a sword that French General Lafayette had awarded him. Like, this guy was doing such a good job, Lafayette took notice of him. He says, you know what, man? Let me give you my sword. Now, this is an ornate sword. You know what I mean? It's like, it's beautiful. French, the general sword. Shays is poor. Think they're paying a captain a lot in the Continental Army? No. So he sells it. And he gets criticized. He's like, you know what? Screw you. I don't need you. I'm freaking out. I'm leaving. So he leaves the Continental Army. He put in his time. He wasn't AWOL. He just got out. Afterward, he settled in Pelham, Massachusetts. 1786 and 87, Shays was one of the leaders of an armed uprising in Massachusetts caused mainly by excessive land taxation. These people generally like taxes to begin with. Excessive land taxation, high legal costs, and economic depression. Following the American Revolution, the uprising became known as Shays' Rebellion. The insurgents were mostly poor farmers who were, listen to this, who were threatened with loss of property and imprisonment for debt. Now, does anybody in here have a car payment? Okay, what happens if you miss your car payment 2 months in a row? 3 months in a row? The repo man's coming. You don't own that car. The bank owns that car. And they're going to send you guys ever seen that TV show, Repo Man? Yeah. Yeah. It's freaking crazy, man. People like, what? You're taking my car? Yeah, man, you didn't pay your bill. What happens if you can't pay your mortgage payment on your house? They foreclose on your house. Now, wait a second. Do they send you to prison for that? In this country, do you go to prison for an inability to pay your debts? No! That's what they were doing in Massachusetts. First, they had all these high taxes on the landowners. You're a farmer. You have a bad crop. You can't pay your debts. You can't pay your taxes. And then they put you in jail. Can anybody blame Daniel Shays and these other farmers for being angry? Paige, would you be pissed? Be pissed. So what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to join up with like 800 other followers, okay? So what they demanded was protective legislation, an abolition of the Court of Common Pleas, and a radical reduction in taxes. In 1786, armed mobs prevented the sitting of the courts of Northampton, Worcester, Great Barrington, and Concord because they were putting people in jail. And Shays, with 800 followers, broke up a session of the state Supreme Court in Springfield while attempting to seize the federal arsenal. Remember that guy, John Brown? Civil War? Harper's Ferry? Tried to seize the federal arsenal? Okay? This is what Shays is doing. And his men were repulsed by state militia. Now, this took a while. Okay? The rebels fled towards Petersham, where they were finally defeated. Most of the men were pardoned later in the year. Shays, who was a leader, was condemned to death, escaped to Vermont, and then was pardoned a year later. Trying to seize the federal arsenal in an armed insurrection. He was pardoned. Why? Why was he pardoned? Because he was right. You don't put people in jail for an inability to pay their debts. You don't overtax people where they can't survive in an economic depression. He was right to be mad. So, Jefferson, who's in France, gets this letter in the mail from John Adams' son-in-law, this guy named William Stephen Smith. He married Adams' daughter, yeah, Nabby. They called her Nabby, okay? About what's going on in the States. Like, this is crazy, man. They have this big rebellion. They have trouble putting it down. The country's falling apart. We've got insurrections, all this. So let's see what Jefferson has to say about that. Okay. Nathan, boring you? Celine? I'm boring you? Natalie, looks like you could just drop off the cliff right now and fall asleep. Jefferson. We're on the third paragraph. What country ever before existed a century and a half without a rebellion? And what country can preserve its liberties if their rulers are not warned from time to time that their people preserve the spirit of resistance? Let them take arms. The remedy is to set them right as to the facts, pardon and pacify them. What signify a few lives lost in a century or two? The tree of liberty must be refreshed from time to time with the blood of patriots and tyrants. It is its natural manure. Jefferson doesn't seem to be too bothered by this rebellion back in the colony, does he? Now, his protege, Madison, sends him a letter on page 41. Now, we talked about Madison. He's a smart guy. He's worried about what's going on over here. So Jefferson replies to him. And he says this: I'm impatient to learn your sentiments on the troubles of the eastern states. So far as I've yet seen, they do not appear to threaten serious consequences. Those states have suffered from a stoppage of their channels of commerce, which have not yet found other issues. This must render money scarce and make people uneasy. Yes, people are uneasy. I hold it that a little rebellion now and again is a good thing, and is necessary in the political world as storms in the physical. Unsuccessful rebellions indeed, generally establish encroachments on the rights of people which have produced them. An observation of this truth should render honest Republicans so mild in their punishment of rebellions as to not to discourage them too much. It is a medicine necessary for the sound health of government. Yeah. When people get angry, they have to vent that frustration. You understand? If you don't allow people to vent that frustration, it builds and it builds and it builds and it gets worse. So let me just take you back 2 years, 3 years, to the Black Lives Matter protests that happened all over this country, but places like Kenosha, Wisconsin, Minneapolis, Minnesota, Seattle, Portland. Yes? Massive protests. Now, is it illegal to block an interstate and stop traffic from flowing down an interstate? Are you just allowed to go out and walk in the middle of Kellogg and stop traffic? Is that legal? No, it's against the law. Now, do you remember hearing anything about how these protesters were rounded up and put in jail for 10 years? If they were arrested at all, they were booked and let out that night, if not the next morning. Follow me? So there is a repercussion, breaking the law, civil disobedience, yes? But not so harsh as to discourage it too much. Because if you don't let people blow off steam, guys, it could get much worse. Follow me? You agree with that? Now, here's the thing. You got protests on the left, and you got protests on the right. So some of the protests you're going to agree with, and some of them you're not. Now, if you're a moderate, who knows what the hell you think? You with me? So it's important, guys, that we respect other people's right to protest that we disagree with. You follow me? Okay? Now, then there's January 6th. which was what some refer to as an insurrection. Now, I don't know if you've ever heard of a successful unarmed insurrection ever in history, but it was an unarmed insurrection. Or you could call it a mob and a riot. I think probably the latter, I would think it was. Okay. So, how have the punishments been coming down for the January 6th people? Are they getting booked into jail and then kicked loose? Some of them serving lengthy prison time. Now, if you assault a police officer, that's punishment, yes? What happened to the immigrants that assaulted NYPD police officers in New York City 2.5 weeks ago? Does anybody know what happened to them? They booked and released them. Okay? So this is the hypocrisy here. Now, what happened at the Capitol on January 6th was wrong. So was blocking I-70. They are different. One involves the government building. But if you remember Portland, where they tried to burn down the district court building in Portland, which is a federal court building, did those people get long prison sentences? The ones that were rioting and breaking windows and so forth there? The answer is no. My point is just this, guys. You can think whatever you think. But Jefferson thought that the leaders of this country needed to be reminded who was in charge. If we are too frightened to speak out against our government because we think we're going to face a long jail term, is that healthy for America or is that dangerous for America? You tell me. All right. Tomorrow we'll start reading the father of the Constitution, some of his work.